Order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start the camera.
I did.
Roll call, Supervisor Coyer.
Here.
Councilman Barber.
Here.
Councilman Carter.
Here.
Councilman Zalowski is absent. Councilman Barron.
Yes.
Okay. I need a motion to accept the minutes from the July 30th special meeting, which is about amending local laws, and the regular board meeting.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get this motion started to accept the minutes for the July 30th special meeting, which includes the local law meeting, and also with that, the regular board meeting. I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, you all have a copy of the financial report. This gets updated at the end of each month, so it's pretty much the same as the end of last month, until the bills get added in. And we're going to go ahead and jump into person addressing the board. We've got Jim Pinero here. He's a Region 5 aquatic biologist with DEC Division of Fish and Wildlife. And Jim's going to talk to us about his thoughts on lowering the lake issue, and then also the fish survey. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Go ahead, Jim. It's all you.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board. I won't lie that drawdowns are one of the more contentious types of aquatic vegetation control that there is, so I'm not surprised by some of the struggles that you've had to deal with as far as trying to implement this to please all parties. What I do want to say is I think we've had a long history of correspondences between the town and DEC about the types of impacts that can occur from lake drawdowns, going back to probably prior to 2012, but that's some of the more recent correspondences that we have. And an additional letter I believe you received from my colleague in 2021, Chris Powers, which outlines those. I do have copies if any of the board members would like to see those if you haven't seen them previously. One thing that I want to stress is the town can take action on a drawdown without permission from DEC. So that is entirely a decision that the board can make. However, my concern as the fisheries biologist responsible for Chazy Lake, I want to make sure that whatever decision the town does decide to make, that it works in concert with what the department is trying to do from a fisheries management perspective. I think everyone here knows that the lake, the watershed, the ecosystem as a whole, one action leads to another, and we want to be working together in a unified effort so that, for instance, if the town undertakes something, it's not impeding something that the state is trying to accomplish with its management actions. So that's the biggest point that I want to drive home. For instance, if DEC is trying to manage the lake as a naturally reproducing lake trout lake, a large drawdown in December would be very, very difficult for us, for DEC to achieve its fisheries management goals. So regardless of what that decision is by the town, if the state has to adapt its fisheries management policies for the lake, we will have to do that because obviously the state is making an investment through stocking and other management techniques that we don't want to be wasting if the town is taking a different action. So with that, I'd like to at least explain the differences that we have seen from the prior fisheries survey that the department completed in 2009 versus a survey that we just completed this summer. We essentially mirrored the 2009 survey with the amount of effort and net types and locations that we set in 2025. The biggest difference is in 2009, the state was managing this water and trying to provide a landlocked salmon fishery. I want to say it was about 2012 was when we stopped stocking landlocked salmon and switched entirely to rainbow trout and lake trout. Now previously we were stocking lake trout, and there is a long history of variable stocking that has taken place in Chazy Lake starting in 1941. But recently, I'll say the last 15 years, we have completely switched from a salmon fishery to a lake trout and rainbow trout fishery. In 2009, we did catch over 20 harvestable landlocked salmon. So this was providing a very good salmon fishery at that time. However, some of my predecessors were very concerned about drawdown proposals at that time and decided to switch away from landlocked salmon and go with rainbow trout instead. Just because of the concern that a salmon fishery is, one, not only very hard to achieve, but two, is one of the more expensive fish species that we raise. So making sure we're making wise use of those stocking resources was a concern. At that time, in 2009, we also saw a reduced catch rate of lake trout. That was concerning for us because we had stopped stocking lake trout for several years in order to try and determine how much natural reproduction was occurring. Although we are seeing some natural reproduction from lake trout at that time, we did decide to allocate additional lake trout for stocking in Chazy Lake. That management change, we believe, has been very successful. We caught, we captured 16 different size classes of lake trout in 2025 versus only 5 in 2009. So, and the size distribution of those lake trout that we caught was, I'll say, highly variable, which would indicate that there's many different age classes surviving in the lake. Some of them are rather large and in good health. So it's definitely providing a quality fishery for anglers and lake shorefront owners. That seems to be a very high quality fishery for this lake. It's very successful. We'd like to continue that. In addition, DEC is bound by certain management guidelines within the Adirondack Park. One of those guidelines is, where possible, manage for native species within a body of water. Lake trout is that fishery for Chazy Lake. Obviously, rainbow trout are not native to anywhere in New York, but that is a alternative that we have been providing at least for the last 15 years. I have to go back to the records to see when we actually started that stocking policy. So given that, the results we have show a high quality salmonid trout fishery, cold water fishery for Shazy Lake. We also had finally documented one northern pike in our catch, although I know they've been present for quite a while. And that is a direct result of our type of netting that we do. So we will use different types of nets to target different species of fish and set them accordingly. We have never targeted catching northern pike in our net sets. Whether it was 2009 or 2025, our target was not northern pike, so we would not expect to catch very many. We might catch a few as bycatch, but we were not targeting them. In this case, we did catch one small northern pike, so we can finally say that yes, they are absolutely confirmed present. We knew that already. We just did not have it in our records as DEC catching them. We also had very good catches of rainbow smelt, which rainbow smelt are these small forage for your lake trout fishery. So it's very important to us to see that there is ample forage for that larger predatory fish that we're stocking. We also saw some small numbers of smallmouth bass. Let's see, some various shiners and a high number of yellow perch, which is pretty common for most of our surveys. The numbers for other species were very comparable to the 2009 survey, other than the salmon and lake trout, which I mentioned earlier. So, with that, there does not appear to be any drastic change in the makeup of the fishery in Shazy Lake as far as different species, the numbers being higher or lower. Of course, we haven't aged any scales or done a fine-tuned review of that info yet, which we intend to do this winter. But preliminary results look fairly representative of what we caught in 2009, other than that change from salmon to lake trout stocking. So, that summarizes the fisheries survey.
Mhm.
Can I ask you a question on that survey?
Yes.
At one time, this lake was pike-free. Does that concern DEC that pike are now in our lake that never have been before? As far as the overall, I want to say this, competition for the feeder fish now for the lake trout?
I see what you're saying. I will say no, and the reason behind that is there are many waters where northern pike were not present previously. In fact, we spend a lot of time working on non-native or introduced fish species across the Adirondacks and elsewhere. The way that northern pike have encompassed their population across Shazy Lake has happened over time, and it seems like that must have happened probably mid to late 90s, and you had a immediate influx of that population. So it appears that we were seeing more and more northern pike throughout the early 2000s into 2010-12. At this time, we do not see, I'll call it burgeoning populations of northern pike. A lot of that has to do with the type of habitat that Shazy Lake provides. The Shazy Lake Watershed Initiative has a great map right at the boat launch of their vegetation surveys. It's a bio-based map of where the vegetation occurs. Northern pike are very limited by the amount of vegetation that is, or cover, that is offered in a body of water, because that is their spawning habitat. specifically, northern pike need vegetated shallows less than 1 foot of water at ice out. That brings you right to the impacts from the drawdown. Most lakes that we see, I'll call it larger or higher amplitude drawdowns, have impacts on northern pike spawning, specifically because of when the drawdown occurs and when the refill occurs. So a gravid female northern pike is looking to lay eggs a week or two after ice out, and if the lake hasn't refilled to areas that are vegetated, they don't have access to that spawning habitat. Or if they are spawning, they're spawning in areas that are currently shallow but soon to be deeper. And when that change occurs, there's often predation that happens on those nests. So we have found, and there is plenty of literature out there, a strong correlation between the impacts on northern pike and drawdowns.
Now, is northern pike is that a program within DEC where they do stock lakes with northern pike?
No,
No.
we do not raise any northern pike anywhere in New York State.
Okay.
I got 2 questions. When you put the gill nets in, how many locations do you use?
If my memory serves me correctly, we surveyed 12 sites across the lake. Some are
That's good.
bottom sets, some are suspended mid-water column, depending on the species we're targeting. We will tailor the survey to what our objective is, what we are trying to find out, the information we're trying to gather. We will tailor the survey specifically to try and meet that objective.
Now, when you put the gill nets down in 12 different locations, do you do it all at one period, or do you do it throughout the year, or what's the best way to do it?
So that will depend on what we are trying to achieve with the survey. So if we were trying to conduct I'll call it a comprehensive lake-wide survey, we actually have a protocol for that, and it includes various sampling techniques. So we might spend the spring at ice out trap netting for northern pike, and then come back later in the year and set gill nets in the summertime when a thermocline is set up in the lake and try to catch trout and salmon. And then come back in the fall and electrofish the shoreline for walleye. It really depends on what we're trying to achieve. All of that would occur on the same body of water across probably a few years, to be honest.
Do the brook trout that are in the brooks that come into the lake, do they go out into the lake very much? Do you find much brook trout in the lake?
We have not found that in Chazy Lake. I will not say that that doesn't occur everywhere. There are certain bodies of water where that may occur. In fact, Lake Ontario has, the province of Ontario has many lakes that will have brook trout that do that. We do not see that on a regular basis here in the Adirondacks.
Do the rainbow trout, do they breed in Chazy Lake, or do they have to be stocked constantly?
That is a good question. So we have not seen any evidence of reproduction in rainbow trout. So most of your trout species, other than lake trout, will use tributaries for spawning. So if we were seeing reproducing rainbow trout, we should be finding those in the tributaries surrounding the lake. We have not documented that as of to date, anyways.
Thank you.
Any other
That's
questions?
no, that's quite interesting, actually.
So,
I'm very thankful that you did the survey, because I was very interested for years to see how the fishery was doing, and it seems like it's pretty healthy. So That's very good.
It certainly seems that way. I mean, this is a beautiful lake. It's deep, it has good temperature dissolved oxygen profiles. You know, it provides a quality lake trout fishery.
Does the deepest water, is this lake considered olotrophic in that the deepest water doesn't turn over? Or is the deepest water turning over also?
It should, well, I'll say I don't have the information to completely answer that.
Okay.
What we have seen in the past is a complete turnover of the flow. That's typically what happens. So with that, I'd like to transition to the drawdown, because that's really why you guys are looking for some answers. I don't know, did I send you the literature that I have a report that talks about specifically drawdowns and the potential impacts or lack of impacts from drawdowns. So one of the items that this study, I'll call it, that's a better term for it, talks about is the impacts of the littoral zone, or the shallow edges of the lake where the vegetation is growing. There is a direct correlation between drawdowns and their effectiveness at controlling aquatic vegetation growing in those shallows. There is no question a drawdown does a very good job of controlling aquatic vegetation in areas that are exposed for the duration of the winter. However, there is also a very strong tie to where a drawdown occurs, wherever that level stops and vegetation can still grow at that depth, that vegetation does really well and is very good at recolonizing shallows that have been previously exposed from the drawdown the prior winter.
Now, when you say recolonize the shallows, are you talking all species of aquatic plant life, or just the invasive part of that process?
So this study does not specify species. Obviously, invasive aquatic or aquatic invasive species are much more prolific.
Yeah.
That's why they are invasive. So they are certainly going to outcompete many of the natives trying to recolonize that area.
Okay.
Just by the nature of what you're dealing with, you know, you are setting up a pattern where you are inviting invasives to colonize a portion of that littoral zone at a much faster rate than native species would normally be trying to colonize.
Okay.
Now, granted, the lake level is altered by the dam, so was it native to begin with? That's a philosophical question.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
so I can certainly leave this with you if you guys would like to reference this. I also have it electronically. I can distribute it that way if you'd like.
So if I understand what you just said, so a drawdown, it definitely kills the vegetation that is exposed over the winter. I know it's got to be frozen though. I mean, the depth of the ice is critical as far as
Right.
that. But when the water comes back in, everything's going to grow back, but but the invasive species is going to grow back a lot faster. So
Yes, essentially.
so
I
it's
mean,
going to replace.
it's not a guarantee.
Right.
But, you
It's-
know,
yeah, it's-
just
it's
by
Mother
the nature
Nature's-
of what you're dealing with, that's typically what happens.
I live on the west side of the lake, and there's extensive wetlands in my area, and there's two rather large creeks that come in off Lion Mountain. Now there's rushes that grow, those thin, round plants, and they come back after the drawdown. They don't seem to be impacted. One thing I've noticed though is there's a birdgrass that has been in the lake since I've been here, over 20 years. But after the drawdown, the birdgrass has increased. You know, it forms these big mats of green that goes up, and there's a lot of algae between them. It impacts the water quality. And can you speak to that at all, how that would spread? Because I've noticed it got worse. I mean, big whole areas that used to be open now are filled with birdgrass.
Huh, interesting. So I'd be curious what species that specifically is.
I was told it's called birdgrass, but
Yeah.
it has a scientific name, which it escapes me at the moment.
I'm wondering if it's Sparkanium, but regardless of
It's
the.
in the Saranac River. If
Okay.
you're in the town of Saranac and you look behind the buildings where the Saranac River starts to drain out of the Lake Flower,
Oh,
you
okay.
see it in the water.
Yep, okay.
It's the same thing.
Gotcha. So that's a good example of where altering water levels can help some species or hinder other species. So, you know, if you're exposing soils that in the wintertime by pulling the lake down, you might actually be helping distribute the root systems for those particular species. Not knowing the species, I can't guarantee that, but you're going to promote certain types of vegetation that do well by being exposed. So a natural wetland species, wetlands have evolved with dynamic water levels. You know, there's nothing out there, no system in the natural world is static, so a lot of these natural wetland species can take small, I'll say, probably some of them up to a couple feet of water level fluctuations on a regular basis and still survive just fine. I don't know about the algae growth within those rushes, but that
The rushes
is-
are clean, but the birdgrass,
Okay,
it becomes a muck.
yeah,
It's
Yep.
very thick, and it's, the clarity of the water in Chazy Lake's rather exceptional, but in the areas where you have big, large mats,
mhm,
I mean, you might have a mat that's half the size of this room, and the water quality is, you know, filled with algae.
interesting.
People pull them up to clear their swimming areas, but you have to dig them up with a pitchfork and get the roots, otherwise, literally within a couple of weeks, they come right back up.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that is part of the natural eutrophication of a lake, you know, depositing additional biomass, detritus, leaves and debris, things like that, that provide growing media for these species. One thing that I have seen at other bodies of water across the park where they conduct drawdowns is you will often see areas adjacent to streams and creeks or inlets. When you pull down the water level, now you have created that stream channel that goes further out into the water body. In the spring or some other event, it overflows that area that's been drawn down. You're actually accelerating the deposition of silt and other organic materials at those deltas and promoting additional growth.
Well, interesting point, because I'm not trying to spread my propaganda, but the two big creeks that empty in an area I call Hemlock Bay, but that's not the official name, because there's some old growth hemlocks around there. And the creeks have gone out maybe 75 yards to create deltas.
Mhm.
And now there's sedimentation where there's big sandbars and the water is a lot shallower. Where it used to be 6 feet, it's, you know, 4 or 5 feet now. And I did document this with photographs, but the photographs, when I got a new phone, got destroyed. But it's very alarming, because there's the creek that goes through my property used to be stone, gravel, out to the lake, and then there was a fan of gravel. Now, since the drawdown happened, there's a 4 or 5 foot deep trench where the creek washed out all the sediment, and now there's a deep channel that goes way out, and it's slowly filling back up with gravel again, because this creek, you know, since we've had a drought this year, it's just a trickle. I mean, it's about this wide and that deep, but it can be 5 feet deep and 20 feet wide, you know, on the floodplain during a big storm. So I've noticed that, and that might have something to do with altering the fish laying areas, because there used to be gravel all out to now there's a deep trench, you know. Also, mussels there used to be mussels everywhere, and the drawdown killed thousands of mussels. And now the mussels are back, and you can see in the shallow, you used to have to go out to 5 feet of water to find the mussels. Now you can find mussels, you know, in the shallower areas.
Yeah, that's pretty typical of an impoundment that gets drawn down. So, can you remind me the height of the dam total? Do we know that? I didn't look that. I should have looked that up.
I can go look. But
So height of the dam where it breaks over the spillway, is that what you're talking about?
Just how much the lake was increased by construction of the dam? You know, is it
Oh,
15
geez.
feet high? I could have looked that up, but I didn't think to do that.
I think it's
So-
12 feet, actually.
Well, my recollection was it wasn't an overly tall dam. You know, that's something to think about when you're looking at the areas adjacent to your property, is naturally, prior to there being a dam, these were probably larger wetland complexes that were flooded by creation of the dam.
Mhm.
So what you're seeing by this excessive growth is really just recolonization of that former wetland.
You can see in front of my house and all along the shore for, 200 yards to the south, there's stumps, cedar stumps in the water, and the drawdown the ice has moved a lot of those cedar stumps out of the bottom and scoured the area and pushed them all up into the shore. But you could tell the area was all, was a wetlands. you know.
Right. Yeah, it was previously.
You can also find in the lake the old shoreline, because you walk in and there's one spot where there's all these big rocks. They're buried, most of them, but you can see where there's a line where the old shore used to be.
Gotcha.
So you're going to, if you can send that to me electronically, I can get
Yep, and I'll leave you this
dispersed out. That'd be
hard copy
great.
as well. So, let me make sure I'm on track here. Okay, so, I know previously there was talk about a 1 foot, 12-inch drawdown with a 3 foot drawdown every other year, every third year, or something like that?
Previously it was like 2.5 every 3 years was what,
Okay,
but we haven't had one in 5 years.
5 years.
okay. And is there a alternate proposal that is being discussed, or
Well, as far as milfoil control,
as far as a drawdown, if you were considering an alternate?
well, the latest thing that we've discussed is, we have some, damage to our dam that we need repaired. And, we're hoping that, we applied for a grant because we've got about $500,000 worth of damage on the dam. And, so we've applied for a grant. We'll know in December how much we get, if we get anything. At that time, if we can schedule the repairs, whenever those repairs occur, we're gonna have to draw it down,
Yep.
because a lot of the damage, according to engineers, when the lake was down low, where most of the damage, the critical damage is at the bottom of the concrete wall, where it got scoured underneath. So we've got, exposed underneath the concrete,
Mhm.
because it's concrete with a earth back
Right.
to it.
Okay.
So those are areas, and there's broken concrete with rebar showing, so those areas are critical for us to repair. So we're hoping in like the late spring, as soon as it's feasible to, once the ice is gone, late spring, that if we can get the repairs done then, it would be prior to people using the lake season, prior to the summer season, when people want to get on the lake and that kind of thing. So
Gotcha. Okay.
that's what we're hoping can happen. It
Okay.
all depends on how much.
And the timeline for it to start and finish, how it impact as well.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, a dam safety issue like that is, that takes priority.
What is the impact of, say, a drawdown in May, for example, or late
Mhm.
April, early May?
Depending on the species, it could be significant. That is usually the time of year that we try and avoid conducting a drawdown. So that leads me right into the next aspect of this is, if a drawdown is proposed, regardless whether it's for controlling aquatic vegetation or, repairs to the dam, the department would want to work with the town to make sure that we can do this in the most responsible manner.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In particular, we usually talk about trying to avoid exposing spawning beds for, in this case, ice out, it might be northern pike. It could be a little bit later on in the season, probably late May through early June would be spawning bass populations, and then into the end of June would be your sunfish species.
So if we could do it right after ice out, we could kill all the northern pike.
Again, that is a decision that the town can make. If it is done for a controlling aquatic vegetation, that would be another matter. When that drawdown occurs, the amplitude of it. The timing is very critical, and trying to time those events to occur to have the least amount of natural resource impacts, it would be our preference. Obviously, everybody's not going to agree at the table, but our job is to, or at least my job, is to try and minimize that impact as much as possible.
Yeah, it would definitely be, in concert with what, the time of year where it would be least damage to what's in the lake.
Yep.
So.
I mean, I can't, not knowing the scope of your repair work, and depending on how much of a drawdown is necessary.
It really, really it wouldn't be a whole lot. As you know, the lakes are low right now because of, it really wouldn't have to be much lower than what it is right now, because a majority of the dam is exposed in those, where the damages are.
The high
At this
impact
time.
areas, yeah.
Yeah, so, there's probably I would say less than a foot in some, along where some of the damage is of water right now, so it wouldn't have to really
Crazy.
go that much lower than what it is now.
Yeah, so if you had that project planned and you had your funding all lined up and contracts signed, we would say, okay, just leave the water level the same all winter long right now, do your work in the spring, and there wouldn't be really any impact from it. Or at least it would be minimized as much as possible. If we were to come in and say, well, we need to do a 4-foot drawdown starting April 1, we would be concerned. So that's where the timing of these types of events is really critical.
Yep.
We try really hard, especially where the department manages a body of water, to make sure that the timing that we conduct these things is as responsible as we can be. Typically, previously we had a general permit for our wildlife management areas across the state where we would conduct a drawdown. And the drawdown would have to occur prior to, usually after Labor Day, because that's when folks want to be out there, but prior to October, might have been 1st or 15th,
First.
but it was trying to avoid exposing soils to freezing conditions after amphibians and reptiles, turtles and whatnot had already established where they wanted to be for the winter, exposing them at that point in, mid-November. Now those species are getting killed off by being exposed to those freezing temperatures all winter.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if the drawdown had occurred by October 1, well, those species are still active and can get to deeper water. So,
I got a question about that. This year, for the first time, my wife and I observed big clouds of tadpoles in the water in front of our camp. And we had never seen that before. It was really quite exciting. And when the drawdown happens, there's a vast area over football fields of mud flats by my house. I assume everything that's living in there, all the amphibians, all the insect larvae, everything's killed completely?
I won't say completely, but there's definitely some mortality associated with that. An alteration in lake levels could occur at any point in time, whether it's natural causes or man-made causes. Is it going to wipe out the entire lake's population of that particular species? Probably not. This paper does touch on that there's really no documented cases where they've completely wiped out a population of a certain, macroinvertebrate or, I'll say frog species, just as an example. It does touch on that, but there's very few conclusions out there that have been drawn to say it's completely annihilated the entire population within the lake, because that just doesn't occur. There may be impacts to that population, but they're not removed from the landscape. Now, obviously, if it was a complete lake drawdown, that might be another story. So.
Now, dragonflies, their larvae live in the shallow water for 3 years, the big dragonflies, before they mature. Is that correct?
So that is highly variable depending on the species that you're dealing with. And
Okay.
there are many different species, so.
All right, well, this is very interesting, but I'm gonna have to ask us to move along. And I appreciate you giving us all your time and looking forward to that documentation. And we'll make it widely available to anybody who wants it. We'll make copies and email it to anybody who wants to have it.
And so one last item, if I can.
Absolutely.
Is in the effort to try and work as best we can, the department and the town, on management of the resources. Anything that the town decides to do, or for that matter, the watershed initiative, it's always very helpful to have a lake management plan and making sure that what the town is doing and the initiative or the department are all working in concert with one another within that plan.
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly go out and draft a great fisheries management plan, but if it doesn't work with what the town or the initiative is trying to do, we're wasting our time. So having a broader document that all of these different aspects could fit into and outline what those goals and objectives are by each action is always very helpful.
So we could have that as part of our comprehensive plan
Yeah.
to include our
I
lake management
was just
plan
thinking
as
the
well.
same thing.
So,
Yeah.
um,
So I do have one final question. Are you in a partnership with, when a permit is requested for Priscillicor, are you one of those individuals that actually sign on and partner to make sure that there's no ill effects from that chemical being placed in the lake?
I will say, not specifically me.
Okay,
You know, I might get asked to look at the application and say, is there any impacts to the fishery? But that would really be the scope of what I would be reviewing.
okay,
I mean, we certainly have other staff that are doing exactly what you're saying.
yeah,
And anytime that there's a permit application for an aquatic herbicide, it gets reviewed by a whole bunch of different DEC divisions and units within it to make sure that it meets all the requirements.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
I got one more thing if I can. The harvesting of the milfoil, the hand harvesting.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's not done correctly, can that have a devastating effect on the regrowth of the milfoil? And are there professionals that do this? Is there like a certification program for this?
For the harvesting?
Yes.
Boy, I'm not aware, I mean, there's certainly training avenues for hand harvesting, and I believe the initiative uses, diver-assisted suction harvesting, which is one of the better techniques that they can use. I'm not aware that there's actually like a professional accreditation that they could get for that. There's certainly,
But if it's not done correctly, does it have an impact? You know, if you're harvesting it and it's flying and it's spreading all over the lake, is that gonna have a negative effect?
oh, it's
correct?
certainly could, yeah, certainly could. You know, I'm not saying that's what's occurring here, but, there is always that type of risk.
Right, because every year, it's like it's a new person, new people that are doing this every year, so there's like very little training, let's say, that's involved with this, you know, it's like, here's some college kids that are spending the summer here, go out and try to harvest this stuff, you know, and there's been complaints that this stuff is floating all over the lake in the areas that they're harvesting, so it's kind of like you were pulling it up, but we're putting it down, you know what I mean?
Right, that's always a risk. So that kind of feeds into the broader lake management plan.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you haven't spoken with APIP, Brian Green from
Mhm.
APIP, he's talked about this for quite some time. He's a great resource of information for that. But knowing where you're going with your management actions. So, you know, it's great to say we spent X amount of money and, you know, Y number of hours diving and we removed this many gallons of milfoil. But it doesn't tell you if you're meeting your